Hey, so UsWork is in QA, but a lot has happened since last week. And that is crazy. I've built a lot of applications, so this is not a hard application. It's just more inspiring right now to build because a lot of the detail work the AI takes care of for me. Now, I'm going to go over where I'm at with this and why it's in QA, which is good, and what are the next steps and how I got there. Because I want to share the process, but I just wanted to get through the process because I took a direction that was so new to me that I wanted to do it and then share it. But basically, I'm going to cover three things. One is I did move away from Lovable. I use Lovable on other applications in a lot of places, and I see some things happening there that are good, like settings or what do they call it, details or something, knowledge, where you can have a rules prompt to drive the application. So it's getting to that place where you can have some control, but I wanted a little bit more control. In these things that I'm saying, I think I could do now in Lovable as well as I started to use it on a different project. So another point about Lovable is maybe it can help me discover a user interface I never thought of before or bring it to the forefront quickly, and then I turn that into code. But either way, I'm still using it and I'm still a fan. In this case, I went to Cursor and I'm going to show some tricks around that I'm learning. And then Supabase, I've just brought it down a little bit. I brought it up, it's key, but I'm not using the edge functions, which Lovable did a lot with. And my pattern is a little bit more simplistic, but it's working. And then finally, I'll go over some of the QA and deployment process that I'm doing and almost getting to a point where I can perfectly deploy from local or whatever would be your development to production. So let's go over these. So the Cursor part was just me wanting to, I struggled with deploying the Lovable app, and there was a lot of fragility in it, partly my inexperience with Netlify and Edge functions in Supabase. And Lovable, to me, had a few parts in the code where I had to replace the environment variables or replace hard-coded URLs with environment variables. So I really simplified things a lot, and we're going to see that in a moment. And then in that moment, I'm like, okay, I really don't need all these edge functions. All I'm doing is very simple, honestly. Back to the drawing board, I just used N8N to make my two APIs. It was really that easy, right? Where I can get jobs or post jobs. And actually, that one's the product development. So you can see that it's just a normal, it's going to hit N8N, it's going to do the particular queries of the database and get the latest particular jobs. And then you can post a job. Now, again, just simple N8N stuff. So I just didn't need to do all the extra things there. That's all. Give me the jobs that are open and paginate and not authorize if you don't have a right token. And then otherwise you want to go reply to a job, great. And I was done within an hour on that one, not even. Most of my time was messing up on this pagination thing, which I need to just simplify. From there, I got done with that, and I'm like, okay, I then took Cursor, and I'm like, okay, I'm really saw a good video on Cursor. I'll link to it below. With Cursor, after watching some videos on things, and it's not perfect, like none of this stuff is perfect, but it's gonna get better. And I think about this a lot. Could I have built this quicker? Maybe. I doubt it. I have an application right now that's been out for years. I have a couple of them, and so I know what it takes, but none of this stuff is perfectly easy. But now that a lot of the detail work is just done for me, I don't have to think about it as much. So this one is just searching recalls, but I had to go aggregate those. And to do that now with N8N would be a day worth of work and to plug in the UI. So this took me a while in Laravel with subscriptions and everything. And so basically, let me get my notes. So basically I go into Cursor and I just started to follow some rules I saw in that video where I gave, speaking of rules, where I gave it a rules file and I defined what I want, what this project's about, how I want things done. I want Supabase in a certain way. I want to basically get all the migrations in place so I can push them up, and I'll show that in a moment. I talked about how my application works. What are the resources or models? How will Stripe work? How will Access work? This is a good example. And then we'll talk about Supabase in a moment, how good it is, but they have all these prompts here to help you as well, where they're putting into here markdown files that you can then use in your workflow to do things with the database. And then I started putting mine here as well, and I would just call those into place down here when I was doing something I wanted to follow that. I even started doing features in there, and I don't know why, I think I moved them down here, but either way, where I can then write a feature in the markdown and have that be what guides it. And every time I come back to that feature, like adding a job, editing a job, whatever, it could then guide the AI to know where it's working. Very rarely did the AI just go off the rails like I have had in Lovable. And one of the big reasons there, and I'll show in a moment with Supabase, is leaning heavily on Supabase UI components. And that's a big win, and I'll show that in a moment. And then as you can see with the UI, there's nothing, I kept it really simple, shad CN to get it going, to keep the style simple. And we can post jobs, we can view jobs, we can edit jobs, and then people can go post proposals to those jobs. I know, horrible wording, horrible naming, but then I'm gonna move over to Firefox for a moment, and then that person can see those jobs. Okay, so now we have this UI, we have this place where people can add jobs, get jobs, or apply to jobs, and then get accepted, and eventually those things kick in. You can see in my history, there's a lot of work here, so it wasn't overnight. I would say a good 6 hours of just going through things and going back and forth and building out things in QA. So not a horrible amount of time, honestly, and only a few times of frustration, but less of those moments where I think I would just wait and wait with Lovable and get nothing out of it or get the wrong thing. Again, I've been using Lovable on another project and I am enjoying it, but that is me taking some of the things I learned here and forcing it into Lovable. So it's a good combination of really clearly defining these rules and keeping the LLM on the rails that you need for your business, for your goals, for your product, and then for the technology. Okay, now let's look at the Supabase part of this. So this is really important. Supabase, they're good. And so basically they have these UI components, which I use now. And when I'm telling the AI I need a login or authentication, I don't let it do it. I say, here's the component that we're using that. When I have to do a file upload, here's the component we're using that. And then in the end, you end up with a .env file that just is Supabase environment, anonymous, and then the URL, and you're done. Okay, I lean really heavily on this pattern here, where we have a Supabase, something's written to a table or some files put into a folder, and those are just, Supabase does a good job of making those events. And then I set up webhooks with those events. And then those webhooks are what hit my N8N. But in here, we have our integrations, we have our database webhooks, and then we have our webhooks. So you can see I have some webhooks here, and they hit the particular areas in N8N. And then N8N does the work from there. So if you look at this, let's go to here. You can see that when a job proposal gets accepted, it's really just a webhook that gets hit by the particular Supabase webhook. And now the really cool part about all of this, and you really just read their docs and get a sense of what's possible, is we get this real-time ability. So you have this real-time system in N8N, so it's connecting to just WebSockets, but using the real-time event system they have built in so that you can react to particular events on a model, a table, a database table. So if I was to go to real-time cursors and you see a cursor there, that's just a real-time event going back and forth into the particular system. So if you were to look here under WebSockets and reload this thing, you'll see there's two WebSockets. And if you put your mouse in one of them, you can see that this UI is able to listen for all of these particular events. And that's really fast, and that's just making this kind of connection or channel that it can listen to and all the events going there. It's a really well-known process, but it comes built into Supabase. So that right there made that particular pattern just solid for me. So now I let the UI do stuff by writing a row to Supabase or updating a row in Supabase, and then let that change of state impact or trigger N8N, and then the UI can listen. Really important, I think. And their UI components are just so easy to use, and it's not about looks. Not that I think they look bad, but it's just about these simple, pluggable things that really can do a lot for you. And the AI doesn't have to code all this over and over again. Okay, so that was a big win there. And a big change for me, shad CN is the UI I use. I basically just say, and everybody knows this stuff, I just basically give cursor screenshots of this area and I just stick to it. You could give it a screenshot of something pretty, you could give it a screenshot of something that Lovable builds for you or VO, and go from there. So yeah, that's it for there. Now the other big one has been the QA part, and this is where I am right now. This is not the fun part. A big spreadsheet of things I want working. I want to make sure I QA. What are some goals I want to get to release it, registration process, deployment. And so I got to go through a lot of that still. And with that said, I'm going to show a video while I'm talking, and basically it shows how I'm going to start using browser use to do the QA for me. I just got to get there, but you can see how we can automate these things as we go. But on that note, how do I deploy the changes to production? And a couple of things there. There's one unknown there is I'm not good with Netlify, but I'm reading about it or ChatGPTing about it and getting a sense of how they want me to do things. So I think it's already deployed, but I want to get to that pattern where I can have a main branch that I don't touch with code or anything, and then staging, which I'm always coding on, or Lovable is using, and then we're deploying. And then from here, when I'm ready, I just merge into prod and it goes live. And so one of the tricks to that is when I'm working locally, and this is what's so neat, is that we have all of this, let's see, Supabase. You have this Supabase running locally, so you have all this information you need to connect to it, to use the local studio and everything. And so as you click around in the studio and build out your particular tables or whatever, you can then just say, hey, diff dump, and all of a sudden you have this particular migration system. So now when you push it to production, you get migrations. And so what happens there, and this file needs cleanup, but just so you can see, when I deploy now, it runs a build and says, okay, is your build passing? Great. There's no test right now, but I can make that whole browser use thing I just showed a moment ago be the test. But what happens here is then when it gets to this point, it will run these 3 lines. Now only 2 because there are no functions, and it fails because there's no functions. I don't know how to tell it not to. But once I add a function, I'll deploy it this way. But we just say, hey, let's link to our project ID, and we're going to push these migrations up there. And it's been going really well on that end. So on my local, I'll be like, oh, I need this new table, or I need this new field. I do the work, I diff it out, put it in, push it, and it's good. Same with the code, obviously, but the code is the easy part. It's migrations that I just had to learn how Supabase wants to do it. And these patterns are really established. But that about sums it up. Again, QA mode, I'll show some screenshots throughout this video. You can see it working. I'll be fixing up anything I find in the next week. It's so close. I just got to fix up the access credentials, double check all my row level security, and just plug in real Stripe. I'm in test mode, which is working great. And that worked out nice because Stripe hits the webhook of N8N. N8N does all the updates in the database, and the UI just pops and it shows you as a subscribed user. And if you unsubscribe, it would remove you from access there. So I just got to keep going down that list and get that done. But this, I just want to share before I go too far more into the weeds, because I don't want to wait till it's done, because things are never done, and I make this part of the process. But it was a big change. I did, like I said, I wrestled a lot with AI. Like, I had some moments where it just wouldn't go anywhere. There's nothing, this stuff isn't always, it's, sometimes it's just as hard as coding. It's just different. And I think that's the thing, there's no going back. We're never going to have applications coded all by hand anymore. So the trick is, how do we know how to play our part as the builder and let it be the coder? Let it be the developer, let it be the designer, and how do we play our part as the builder or orchestrator who helps to guide it and bring it all together? And it's just getting better and better. That is it. I mean, I am so close. I want to share this, show you the process. I'll go into detail of each process before long, especially the QA part because it is hard, and the deployment part because that is hard as well, and they're both really key. All right, thank you.